All right. All right. Now let's go to the waterfall tips and tricks. Okay. Now, as we have mentioned before, so the project charter is actually based on the business case. Remember this, okay? And it is the first official document in the project that authorizes its existence. Now, when we say scope manage the plan or we say schedule manage the plan, these two are part of the project management plan, and they contain, and each one of them actually, each one of them contains a description of which tools and techniques that you will be using to manage the scope or the schedule, right? The scope baseline is the approved version of the scope statement. That's a document that contains the list of deliverables, the success factors, constraints, assumptions, etc. And also the scope baseline also is the approved version of the WBS and the WBS dictionary. WBS is the work breakdown structure as we have seen it in our training. Now, the WBS helps the team. And remember, we have put here for you tips and tricks based on the answers from the questions that are very similar to the ones in the PMP exam. That's from where we created our tips and tricks, okay? So please, each bullet in these tips and tricks will help you answer at least a question in the exam. Now, the WBS helps the team visualize the project work, okay, because actually it represents the work in organized way, and also how the scope is organized, okay. And the WBS is usually deliverables oriented. Scope control means the team is verifying if the deliverables are aligned with the requirements. Okay, so while they are creating the deliverables, they verify all the time that what they're creating is actually aligned with what's being expected. However, scope validation, that's when the customer approves the deliverables, and the customer must validate the scope in written form before we proceed with the closing of the project. Okay, the project manager should not accept any requirements without their acceptance criteria, because if you will accept any requirements without a defined acceptance criteria, then you might end up having conflicts or disagreements with the project stakeholders. So making sure that you have captured the acceptance criteria of each requirement, that will help you avoid any potential conflicts or disagreements with stakeholders once the requirements have been completed. Okay, a good deliverable is both fit for use and fit for purpose. Now, the steps for the scope management are: first, collect requirements, then define the scope; three, create the WBS, then validate the scope with the customer; and finally, control the scope. And by controlling the scope, we mean managing the changes to the scope baseline through the integrated change control process. Okay. Remember something very important. Key stakeholders, as we have mentioned in the tips and tricks of the stakeholders, key stakeholders must be involved in every project phase of the project to keep them engaged and ensure their acceptance of the deliverables. Now, the more they're engaged and the more they're involved in the project, the higher chance we have of having them accepted the project deliverables. Lead and lag. These are both planning techniques and they are used in the planning phase. Okay. A lead is, performing a task earlier. A lag, is a waiting time. Resource leveling. This leads to expanding schedule. It is used in case we have an over allocated resource, or to adopt with the schedule of a critical resource because, for example, they're busy with other assignments. Resource smoothing, that's using Slack, okay, to fill it out with tasks, and that does not impact the schedule, does not lead to increasing to expanding the schedule. Sorry. Float. By float, we mean prolonging the activity, prolonging the end, or delaying prolonging the activity actually. So instead of an activity, instead of finishing an activity, for example, in 5 days, we can use a float to finish it in, for example, 7 days. However, Slack, that's using for delaying the start of a task. So these are just terms. So in case you have any questions about float or Slack in the exam, that you know what they mean and when to use them, so you can pick the right answer. Okay. The critical path and the network diagram, that's the longest path in the network diagram, and also that's the minimum duration required to complete the project. So all the activities on the critical path, they are important and without any float, okay? So any changes to any activities on the critical path, it will have to go through change request, okay? And the impact must be carefully analyzed. Now, schedule crashing, that means adding resources to finish earlier or faster, but that increases the cost and PMI does not, favor this solution. However, fast tracking, that's, having tasks done in parallel, that might increase some risks, okay? But both are considered as schedule compression techniques, and these are, used during the control phase and through a change request, okay? But always favor, in case we are behind schedule, always favor the fast tracking option and avoid any solutions that increase cost, such as adding resources to crash the schedule. Please remember this. Okay. Here's the integrated change control process described. Now, when there is a need for a change, because, for example, there is a deviation from the baselines, or we have new requirements, or, for example, we are not meeting the acceptance criteria, then, we need to raise, there is a need for to raise a change. So here the project manager will create a change request and will assess or analyze the impact. Then the project manager will log the change into the change log. We'll submit the change request to the change control board. The change control board will review and decide whether to defer the change, reject the change, or approve the change. And then, based on the decision of the CCB, the project manager will update the change log with the decision and the explanation of the change control board and inform the stakeholders. And in case the change request was approved, then the project manager will update the baselines and the change should be implemented. And the last step is monitor the results after the change has been implemented, okay, to check whether the change has given the expected and anticipated results or not, okay. Some tips here: always evaluate before taking a decision, which means always evaluate. So try to evaluate before taking any decision or any action and involve the team. So, that's favored by PMI. Really, PMI favors this. Before taking a decision, try to see, if any of the answers, depicts evaluating the situation. Always raise a change request after checking the situation with the team and sponsor. Okay. Try that. Scope creep is the uncontrolled expansion of the scope, and the board, they decide if the project should continue after each phase review, all right, or a kill point. All right, I think, yeah. Now let's go to the last slide here. Let's talk about the hybrid, okay? Now, there are a lot of questions in the exam about hybrid project management, because you need to understand PMI's mindset. PMI actually is favoring hybrid project management over waterfall, strict waterfall, because it combines between waterfall and agile. And we as project management practitioners, we've concluded that in most of our projects it's better to use hybrid project management, because some parts of the project are better managed with waterfall, some parts are better managed with agile. So that gives us a combination between both of them. And and then having a hybrid project management is most favored. Okay, so hybrid is a mix between agile and waterfall. So in case some requirements are not clear, sorry, no, yeah, in case some requirements are not clear and some requirements are clear, so you have a mix here between known defined requirements and unknown or unclear requirements. So it's better if you use hybrid project management. Um, Also, you can use hybrid in case stakeholders are disagreeing. For example, let me add it for you here actually, and we will see it in one of the questions actually next week or the week after. Also use hybrid in case some stakeholders want full project plan and others prefer to have early results. So, results. Yeah. Now let me explain the third bullet for you here. Okay. Um, now we said that we can use hybrid in case some requirements are clear and others are not. Also, we can use hybrid in case some stakeholders they want to have a full project plan, but others, not others, they prefer to have early results, which means they prefer to see an early version. Okay, so seeing an early version, that means we need to work, using agile approaches. Others want full plan, that's waterfall. So here, a mix between waterfall and agile, then we will go for hybrid. Now, in the exam, you will know the question is about hybrid project management. If it tells you explicitly that, your management project is an hybrid approach, okay, that's explicitly told. But if the question is using, or in the question, terms from waterfall are used and terms from agile are used at the same time, that means that's a hybrid question. Let me give you an example. The question tells you this: you have just finished the planning phase and you're starting the first iteration. Now, the term planning phase, that's waterfall, iteration, that's agile. So here you have a mix between both approaches in one question, then that's hybrid project management. Okay. And then in order to be able to answer this question about hybrid, you need to check in which part of the project are you currently. So you have to read carefully the question, and you need to understand right now in the question, in that situation, that project situation, am I in the agile part or the waterfall part? And depending on what you figure out, then you will choose the answer of that respective approach. Then if you figure out that you are in the agile part, then pick a solution that comes from agile. And if you are in the waterfall part, then pick an action that usually takes place in waterfall. Okay. Tailoring, that's, customizing or selecting which processes and tools to use for which project. So that happens during planning. It can be ongoing. Okay. All right. So these are the tips and tricks for our waterfall and hybrid. Okay. I think that's it. All right. And yeah, I think that's it. And when you're tailoring, make sure that you choose the suitable process and tools for the project and according to any organizational process assets or any project managed office guidance. Okay? All right, so let's put this in a separate recording. I think we can have a 10-minute break right now. Let's have a break and then